Welcome back, Royal Mystery Hunters. I'm your host, and you're watching another gripping episode of Royal Death Investigations. Today we're diving into one of the most controversial reigns in English history, the story of King Stephen, the man who broke a sacred oath and plunged England into 19 years of chaos known as the Anarchy. If you missed our last episode about Henry I's death by lamprey, make sure to check it out, because today's story picks up exactly where that one left off. And if you're enjoying these medieval mysteries, smash that subscribe button and hit the notification bell. The Christmas Crown Heist. Picture this. It's December 1st, 1135. King Henry I has just died in agony after his infamous lamprey feast in Normandy. But when the news reaches Stephen of Blois, Henry's nephew, he doesn't waste time grieving. Instead, he sees the opportunity of a lifetime. Stephen wasn't supposed to be king. Not even close. He was Henry's nephew, born around 1097, grandson of William the Conqueror through his mother Adela. But Stephen had something that Matilda, Henry's designated heir, didn't have at that crucial moment. He was in the right place at the right time, and he was absolutely ruthless. Here's the kicker. Stephen had sworn a sacred oath to support Matilda's claim. At a meeting in Oxford, every major noble in England had knelt before King Henry and promised to support his daughter's right to rule. Stephen was one of those oath-takers, looking his uncle in the eye as he swore to honor his cousin's claim. It was all lies. When news of Henry's death reached Stephen in Normandy, he moved faster than anyone thought possible. While Matilda was securing her position with her husband Geoffrey Plantagenet, Stephen was already crossing the English Channel with a plan that would make him king or get him killed. His first stop? London. The Londoners, faced with choosing between an absent woman or a present charming nobleman, chose Stephen. But he needed more than popular support. He needed the royal treasury and the crown itself, both kept in Winchester. The scene at Winchester Cathedral was essentially a medieval bank robbery. Stephen seized Henry's entire treasury, chests full of gold and silver accumulated over 35 years. With this wealth, he could buy the loyalty of every baron in England. Medieval politics ran on patronage, and Stephen suddenly had the means to make everyone very, very happy. But he still needed religious legitimacy. William de Corbeil, Archbishop of Canterbury, had also sworn to support Matilda. Asking him to crown Stephen was asking him to commit perjury before God, yet somehow, Stephen convinced him. On December 26, 1135, just 25 days after Henry's death, Stephen was crowned King of England. The speed was breathtaking. The audacity stunning. In less than a month, Stephen had stolen a kingdom. The Anarchy. When England bled, Matilda's reaction was probably unprintable. She'd been Holy Roman Empress, she'd negotiated with popes and emperors, and she had no intention of accepting Stephen's theft. By 1138, England was at war with itself. What followed was 19 years of the most destructive civil war in English medieval history. The chroniclers called it the Anarchy, and they weren't exaggerating. England became a patchwork of rival territories, each ruled by barons who built unauthorized castles and terrorized the local population. Stephen's strategy was simple: buy loyalty with land and gold. The problem was that loyalty only lasted as long as his payments, and he was spending Henry's treasury faster than he could replenish it. Meanwhile, Matilda gathered support from nobles who either believed in her claim or saw backing her as profitable. The war swung back and forth like a deadly pendulum. In 1141, Stephen was actually captured at the Battle of Lincoln and became Matilda's prisoner. For a few months it looked like she'd won. But then she alienated the Londoners with her arrogance, was forced to flee the capital, and Stephen was exchanged for one of her supporters. Imagine that prisoner exchange. The King of England swapped like a trading card. For Stephen, it was literally a get-out-of-jail-free card. The war dragged on and on. Castles changed hands, towns burned, harvests were destroyed. One chronicler wrote that Christ and his saints slept during Stephen's reign, meaning even God seemed to have abandoned England. The common people suffered terribly, as armies lived off the land, and rival barons settled scores under cover of the Civil War. The compromise and the end. By the late 1140s, both sides were exhausted. The beginning of the end came from Matilda's son, Henry. This young man didn't just want his mother's crown, he wanted to build an empire. Through inheritance and marriage, he controlled vast territories in France. Adding England would make him the most powerful ruler in Western Europe. In 1153, Henry invaded England, but instead of crushing Stephen, he offered a deal. Stephen could keep the crown for life, but Henry would inherit after his death. Stephen's own son had died, so the offer made sense. The Treaty of Wallingford ended the Civil War, though it took time for all fighting to stop. Stephen, now in his mid-50s and tired of war, accepted. It was a compromise that nobody loved but everyone could live with. By 1154, Stephen was a shadow of the dashing young man who had seized the crown. The Civil War had aged him terribly, and his beloved Queen Maud had died in 1151, leaving him increasingly isolated. Stephen never maintained the grand court of his predecessors. His court was smaller, more informal, perhaps because the treasury was drained, or perhaps because Stephen preferred a warrior's simplicity to royal ceremony. October 1154 found Stephen at Dover, that crucial port guarding England's gateway to the continent. But on October 25, his carefully managed transition to Henry Plantagenet was thrown into chaos when the king was struck down by sudden, agonizing illness. Our sources are frustratingly brief. Richard Baker writes, "He was suddenly seized with the iliac passion, and with an old disease of the hemorrhoids." Gervase of Canterbury records, "The king was suddenly seized with pain in the iliac region, along with an old discharge from hemorrhoids." Let's decode this medieval medical mystery. Iliac passion meant intense pain in the lower abdomen, near the hip bones. Combined with hemorrhoidal problems, this gives us crucial diagnostic clues. The evidence points to acute appendicitis. Stephen was suddenly struck with severe pain in his right iliac region, exactly where the appendix is located. Appendicitis typically strikes without warning, progressing from discomfort to agony within hours. Here's what probably happened. Stephen's appendix became inflamed and infected. In 1154, there was no understanding of bacterial infection or surgical treatment. The inflamed appendix would have ruptured, spilling infected material into his abdominal cavity, causing peritonitis, a life-threatening infection. The symptoms match perfectly: sudden severe abdominal pain, followed by fever, vomiting, and rapid deterioration. At age 57, weakened by years of stress and warfare, Stephen's body couldn't fight the infection. The hemorrhoids mentioned by both chroniclers were likely either a contributing factor, suggesting underlying digestive issues, or a complication of the acute illness, with existing problems worsening due to the body's inflammatory response. Picture Stephen's final hours, alone in Dover Castle, struck down by an invisible enemy no medieval physician could understand. The man who had survived decades of civil war, countless battles, and political intrigue, was finally defeated, not by Matilda's armies, but by his own body. Medieval medicine had no effective painkillers. Stephen would have suffered terribly as peritonitis spread through his abdomen. The irony is heartbreaking. He'd survived 19 years of chaos and finally achieved peace, only to be killed by bacteria in a tiny organ that medieval doctors didn't even know existed. The legacy of an oathbreaker. Stephen died on October 25, 1154, probably in agony, certainly alone. His body was taken to Faversham Abbey, where he was buried beside Queen Maud. The oathbreaker who had caused so much chaos found peace at last. Stephen's death marked the end of the Norman dynasty that had ruled England since 1066. Henry II became king, ruling an empire from Scotland to the Pyrenees. Where Stephen had struggled to control his barons, Henry would create legal and administrative systems that governed England for centuries. Stephen's legacy is complicated. He was a usurper who broke sacred oaths and plunged England into civil war. The suffering was immense, but he was also a product of his time, playing by medieval rules, where opportunities had to be seized. His greatest achievement might have been recognizing when he was beaten, and negotiating peaceful succession with Henry. In the end, Stephen was neither the best nor worst of medieval kings. He saw an opportunity, and took it, fought hard for what he believed was his, and paid the price. His death from appendicitis was anticlimactic after such a dramatic life, but perhaps fitting. Sometimes history's greatest dramas end not with battles, but with bacterial infections. And that concludes our investigation into King Stephen's death. What do you think about Stephen's controversial reign? Villain who destroyed England's peace, or ambitious politician playing by medieval rules? Let me know in the comments. Don't forget to like this video, subscribe for more royal death investigations, and hit that notification bell. Next time we'll investigate another suspicious royal death, involving family betrayal and possible poison. Thanks for joining me for another episode of Royal Death Investigations. In the medieval world, you were never more than one infection away from meeting your maker, even if you wore a crown. See you next time.